Science Uncut, presented by the Volkswagen Foundation.
Not too long ago it seemed that the importance of religion might gradually fade, that our lives and the societies we live in would become ever more secular. This turned out to be false. Today, religion has taken center stage when we discuss and think about pressing issues in our world. How should we actually think about religion nowadays? How can scholars describe and understand religious plurality in new ways? What might political and social action look like when it comes to religious pluralization? The goal of the Herrenhausen Conference on religious pluralization was to find answers to these questions. In his talk, Volkhard Krech builds on the presentations and discussions at the conference. He summarizes his views of the most important results of the conference. The role of globalization, the importance of a historic perspective, poly-centered narratives, the distinctiveness of particular religions, the difference between interreligious dynamics and other spheres of society, the danger of letting religion become a black box, and the need to understand religious insights without sharing a religious perspective. Volkhard Krech is professor of religious studies at the University of Bochum in Germany and director of the International Research Consortium on Dynamics in the History of Religion. His talk is titled Dynamics in the History of Religion. Volkhard Krech gave his talk on October 6, 2016 in Hanover at the Herrenhausen Conference, Religious Pluralization, a Challenge for Modern Societies. The conference was organized by the Volkswagen Foundation.
I don't have a fully prepared paper, but instead would like to share and discuss 7 theses with you, and these theses are the result of taking notes during listening to the various talks given at this conference. My first thesis is interreligious dynamics. Interreligious dynamics are not only caused by migration, but also by modern globalization processes in general. So migration certainly is part of globalization, and we could say that in parts globalization is caused by migration, but as I will explain in other theses, globalization is not only caused by migration, it's so to speak, an emergent level of its own. Religion extends and neglects, in parts at least, national borders. Peter Bayer, I don't have to mention this, has extensively written on the connection of religion and globalization processes. And for example, Matthias König in his talk argued that the connection between religion and law extends and again, in parts, starts to neglect national borders. Thus, we have to study religious developments also at a global scale next to local and regional research. Local and global processes are often, if not always, intertwined, as the term globalization, I think coined by Roland Robertson in the early 1990s, indicates. For example, if I observe interreligious encounter in my hometown Gelsenkirchen in the Ruhr area, where Muslims are involved, I have to be aware, and I will be aware, I'm sure, that this, actually I have experienced it, that this encounter is nolens volens connected to global events and developments such as 9/11 or the so-called Islamic State. So once again, the local and the global is intertwined. Second, process of modern religious globalization must be historicized. Many of the contemporary challenges in and towards the religious field need to be solved urgently. We have heard of many examples during this conference. However, scientific, and I accentuate scientific research, has the advantage, and I think at the same time the duty, to step back and look at societal processes from a distance. In order to better understand interreligious dynamics, we have to do research on historical developments next to contemporary research. As we all know, I'm I think it's quite trivial. However, I would like to remind us of not seeing an alternative between historical and contemporary research. Both needs each other. Contemporary research needs the historical foundation of even long durée process, and the other way around. Historians always have to make clear why history, in what respect history is important, and the same holds true for the history of religions. Interreligious contact is not a new phenomenon, even not restricted to globalization starting in the late 18th century in the more narrow sense. It goes back to early modern times when the age of colonialism and imperialism started. Furthermore, the European Middle Ages, and not only the European Middle Ages, have not been shaped by a Christian monolithic culture, the so-called mittelalterliche Einheitskultur. This was the standard paradigm during the 19th and almost the half of the 20th century. It hasn't been shaped by a monolithic Christian culture as recent medievalist research shows. And finally, interreligious dynamics caused by interreligious contact even started in the Axial Ages as the take-off of the so-called world religions. We all know that the Silk Road, for example, is somehow important for the establishment of the so-called world religions, but all too often neglect the encounter dimension within this process of establishment. In short, the entire history of religions is part of a relational and entangled history. However, the way of how to understand relationality and entanglement still, I think, remains a methodological challenge, as I will at least implicitly deal with in the following thesis. Third, global processes form a specific level of the religious field. The contemporary religious field is not totally shaped by global processes, but global religion constitutes a level of its own. In order to better understand what globality means, the concept of world society might help. As the sociologist Rudolf Stichweh points out, the concept includes a variety of traditions of self-description of society that articulate a consciousness of the global extent of social relationships. Some of the eigenstructures of the world society go back to antiquity and the Middle Ages, not restricted to Europe. While we are starting to get at least a glimpse of the European sources of the world society, starting in ancient times, we, at least to my impression, hardly know anything about its non-European sources, including religions other than Christianity. Much research has to be done in this respect yet. However, despite the structures of the emerging world society, specific features of regional cultures and specific religious traditions do not vanish. It's not the homogenization, as we know, what globalization is all about, but what I said in the beginning, the connection between local events and global processes. The same applies to the religious field. While on the one hand, a global religious field or system or sphere, however your theory taste is about, the specifics of particular religious traditions and regional religious fields remain on the other hand. As I said, religious globalization does not mean homogenization, but the mutual influence of different religious traditions. The unity of a global field consists of global networking. The increasingly collected knowledge of the non-European history of religion since early modern times had and still has an impact on the European history of religions. Even in my hometown, Gelsenkirchen, if neighbors of mine have contacts with Muslims, maybe implicitly, maybe unconsciously, the history of the European history entangled with the so-called Muslim world plays a role even in those contemporary local events. So the non-European history of religions since early modern times had and still has an impact on the European history of religions, not least regarding the collective singular, Reinhard Koselleck, collective singular religion, which has been formed during the 18th century. So I don't buy the argument that the notion, general notion of religion is only a European product of modern times. It's also a result of early modern encounter with non-European cultures and religion, and it even lasts to ancient contacts. And finally, in order to understand the global religious field, we do not have to understand only the eigenstructures of a global religious field, but also have to give up the distinction between center and periphery. Instead of this distinction, we have to replace it by a polycentric paradigm. Klaus Kuschorke and his team in Munich started to apply this perspective to the history of global Christianity. Thus, religious globalization is not shaped by a master narrative, a grand récit. Nevertheless, reference to the contested, not necessarily to the shared, but reference to the contested is a common ground of the global religious field, including questions of what characterizes religion. My fourth thesis is particular religions still form distinguished units under global conditions. So on the one hand, we have a networking, we have the interconnection. On the other hand, particular religious traditions still form distinguished units under global conditions. And this is one of the epistemological challenges of how to understand relationality on the one hand, and the distinguishedness of single religious units. So the part, whole, and so on are one of the epistemological challenges we have to face. Particular religions can, but cannot only be understood with regard to their regional and local specificity. The emergence of world religions can only be fully understood if we consider the adaptation of religious traditions to different cultural contexts, accommodatio, and at the same time consider the content and structure which is adapted. And so the continuation and change question is very important in order to understand religious traditions spreading among at the global scale. Global spreading does not neglect a shared reference to core topics and structures of a religious tradition. And shared, once again, does not mean share the same content, but refer to a common contested ground. Bourdieu, in his field definition, I think this is a nice language game. He, as you know, he raised the question of what is the connection between orthodoxy and heterodoxy, and the answer is doxa. For example, a concise example for this might be, among many other examples, the Christian adoration of Maria, ranging from Brazil via Ghana, Rome to the Philippines. However, the mentioned polycentric paradigm has also to be considered in this case. My fifth thesis is: interreligious dynamics have to be distinguished from interaction of religion with other societal fields such as politics, law, economics, arts, medicine, and so on. In order to understand the complexity of interreligious dynamics, we do not only have to historicize them, as I mentioned earlier in a thesis, but also have to distinguish them from other societal fields, at least analytical. My my experience after working, I don't know, for 25 years as a social scientist of religion, I think there are also empirical arguments for differentiation process, but I reduce it to the argument, at least analytically, we have to distinguish interreligious dynamics within the religious field on the one hand, and other societal spheres, forms, systems, whatever you prefer as a theory, on the other hand. Religious processes certainly interact with, for instance, politics, economics, law, education, and so on. But interaction is only possible on the basis of differentiation. This is an epistemological argument, but as I said, I think it holds also true for empiricism. Thus, we need a better understanding of societal differentiation in order to be able to distinguish between interreligious dynamics on the one hand and interaction of religion with other societal fields on the other. By the way, the history of the history of the secularization paradigm, as Peter Berger in his unique manner referred to, self-ironically, is part of the question how we understand societal differentiation. Secularization could have meant the decline of religious importance, but it can also mean, this is an argument, by the way, made by Niklas Luhmann, the strengthening of the function of religion. So it's not only a question of extension of quantity, how many people refer to religion or not, but that religion itself, without essentializing it, after being not responsible anymore for political, economic, and whatever question, it can refer to its own question of how to deal with transcendence under immanent conditions. So secularization can also mean intensification. It's not only a question of quantity. However, my argument which I would like to make with the fifth thesis is that we have to better understand societal differentiation, including multiple modalities and multiple secularities. The new research consortium in Leipzig. So it's not a master narrative. It can work under different conditions. However, my argument is societal difference. We have to understand the broader context of societal differentiation in order to understand the place of the religious fields and internal interreligious dynamics. My sixth thesis is we need research on the non-religious conditions and consequences of interreligious dynamics, but also research on religious semantics under diverse circumstances itself. Please forgive me my polemics now a little bit. We have heard a lot about how religion gets transformed, how religion gets individualized, how it gets pluralized, diversified, and so on. We have heard a lot about how religious diversity is or is not politically and legally regulated or even instrumentalized. But we heard much less about what gets transformed, what is regulated, what is negotiated, and what is instrumentalized. It seems to me that religion functions more and more as an empty signifier in the academic study of religion, just as religion works as an identity marker and a black box in societal process itself, as Uwe Justus Wenzel has put it, the black box argument. Thus, scientific research bears the danger to explain religion away or not analyze religion itself, but also always the environment of religion. But religion itself, seems to remain a kind of black box. The three-step dramaturgy Uwe Justus Wenzel has drawn seems to be a good indicator for what I mean with this argument. The attribution to religion is the rest which is left after rational or pathological explanations don't work anymore. During the talk, I was reminded of a comment of a person in the television news on the evening of 9/11, when the person took part in a peace demonstration, and the reporter, interviewed the person. The person said that the plane crashes into the Twin Towers had been a terrible event, but the most tragic thing would be that the terrorists had religious reasons for doing this. Excuse me for cynically adding, well, fascist reasons or monetary motives would have been okay, but religious reasons are not acceptable. And this I mean by, the irrational which is left, and which can be an indicator for understanding how religion can work as an identity marker. We all know it's a trivial insight now, at least in the scientific, social scientific work, that religion, for example, in the old and the new Kulturkampf, the cultural clash, worked as an identity marker for power struggles, who has more power, who has not, and some say, I think with a certain right, that the Muslims today are the Catholics of the 19th century, late 19th century German Kulturkampf Catholic position. So we all understand theoretically and sometimes even empirically that religion can work can be instrumentalized somehow as an identity marker for other than religious conflicts, social class conflicts, for example, influence, power, whatever, gender, what have you. But my argument is this is not religion. It's a pointer too. Yeah, an identity marker or a black box or an empty signifier, maybe there isn't anything left, then a black box, then an identity marker, then an empty signifier, but I'm not sure, at least we have to do respective research. In other words, scientific research on religion has to explain what cannot be explained by referring to political, legal, economic, and other societal rationales. In order to do this, we need more research on the interaction between social structures on the one hand and religious semantics on the other. I think that Ernst Rölsch, still, with his book on social teachings of the Christian churches, is a kind of role model, at least for me, what we nowadays call the sociology of knowledge, not in the disciplinary sense, but in the sense of looking at the interactions between social structures on the one hand and semantics on the others. And I think we have a bias on the environment, on the conditions, on the social structures of religion, and I'm saying this self-critically as a social scientist, but don't look enough to what is socially structured? What, for example, empowers? You said it's people, yeah, but people are empowered. Empowered by what? And this still is a religion itself does it with mystification. Scientific analysis cannot rely on mystification, so we have to somehow translate the religious mystification, the self-description, into the scientific language game, and this is one of the biggest and at the same time most elementary epistemological challenges of the scientific study of religion. I would like to conclude with a thesis from the perspective of science policy. So I'm stepping into the political arena now, but hopefully from a scientific point of view. Namely, the scientific study of religion should take up societal challenges regarding religion, make them to an empirical empirical research, but the scientific study of religion should abstain from practical engagement, value judgment, and last but not least, from questions concerning religious truth. You all know the debate Max Weber, the old Max Weber, was engaged in. We all know his distinction between abstraining from value judgment on the one hand, in the sense of foundational value judgment, but at the same time, Weber, what we sometimes forget, said that the Kulturbedeutung, the relevance of our empirical and theoretical work is crucial for every scientific work. So the relation to cultural values is important, but science itself cannot be grounded on value judgment. And last but not least, this I would like to discuss with you, as the scientific study of religion also should abstain from questions concerning religious truth. The sciences, including the science of religion, and I'm well aware of the English sounding of science. Religionswissenschaft in Deutschland doesn't sound that difficult, but I know that the Anglo-Saxon sphere likes to distinguish between the humanities on the one hand and science on the other. I would like to challenge this distinction regarding the study of religion. The scientific field constitutes a specific and autonomous field within modern society, including the study of religion. It is framed and to a certain extent conditioned by political, economic, legal, and other facilities and restrictions, as we all know who we are if we are working at a university, or the economic, bureaucratic, and so conditions as well as restrictions. However, a scientific insight is not wrong only because it is politically not considered opportune. Or a scientific insight is not right only because it gets a huge financial support. Scientific activity should ideally be free of any Weltanschauung, including religious convictions. Thus, we need to foster non-theological comparative study of religion at state universities. Theology understood in the sense of sharing, at least to a certain extent, the internal perspective of one or more religious traditions and treating questions of religious truth. Scientific insights and religious truth are not identical. They are connected to each other, not only, but since the medieval distinction between Glauben and Wissen, belief, faith, and knowledge, it is interconnected, but it's not identical. Scientific insights and religious truth are not identical under modern conditions within societal differentiation. I come back to this societal differentiation question, which we have to deal with much more, I would argue, than we are used to in the scientific research on religion. The study of religion stays outside from religion. It transforms it to a scientific subject of analysis, but while staying outside, the scientific study of religion should draw relations to the inside of religion as good as possible. So not to explain away religion, but not to repeat the religious self-description from an internal perspective. However, this remains one of the most elementary, as I said, most elementary and biggest challenges in the scientific study of religion. How can we understand the agency of religion without sharing religious perspectives? Thank you for your attention.